Hello everyone and welcome to round 8 of this year's European Team Championship. It is Norway versus Netherlands, and on board 1, Magnus Carlsen faces his first 2700 opponent in the event, Jorden van Foreest, playing board 1 for Netherlands. And it's quite an interesting game, quite a clean one, and very different from the, let's say, previous 7 that Magnus already played in this event. So let's check it out. Magnus still without a loss. Jorden did lose one game in round 6 to Nikita Vitigo, then he drew against in round 7, and now he faces Magnus. So let's check out what happened here. Magnus opened with e4, e5, we have knight to f3, knight to c6, and bishop to b5. Going for the Ruy Lopez, we have knight to f6, the Berlin defense, and castles. We have knight captures on e4, rook to e1, and now knight to d6. So very standard stuff, been played thousands of times, and knight captures on e5 is the standard move here. But Magnus goes for a4, is the third most popular continuation, but also been played by very strong players. Bishop to e7 and knight to c3. So just continuing development, a6 challenging the bishop, bishop to f1, and pawn to e4. Giving back the pawn, knight captures on e4, knight captures, rook captures, and now you freed up the d file, so pawn to d5. We have rook to e1, pawn to d4, stopping Magnus from playing pawn to d4, and now bishop to d3. Magnus wants to play bishop to e4 and then advance the pawn to d3, as you have to develop the bishop somehow, and black will probably also challenge that with bishop to e6 followed by bishop to d5. So bishop to e6, Jorden goes for it right away, bishop to e4, and now bishop to d5, offering a trade right away. d3, and here there is a game where queen to d7 was played, but Jorden just castles kingside, and it is now, as of move 14, that we have a completely new game. So Magnus continues developing, bishop to f4, puts pressure on c7, and bishop to b4, attacks the rook on e1, rook to e2, and now rook to c8, adding another defender. We have bishop back to d2, offering a trade, and Jorden goes back, bishop to e7. Queen to e1, aligning the queen and rook nicely with the bishop on e7, and here we have a trade. Bishop captures on e4, rook captures, and now pawn to f5, forcing the rook to move back, rook to e2, and now bishop to f6, nicely defending that pawn. And if it's somehow possible to go after the c2 pawn, could become very relevant in the future, as it is a backwards pawn, not going to be easy to advance it. So pawn to b4 by Magnus, and now queen to d5, getting the queen into the game. Pawn to h4, and now pawn to h6, with bishop to f4, again putting pressure on that c7 pawn, and king to h7, just improving the position of the king a little bit, queen to d2, and now rook f to e8, offering a trade of rooks, which Magnus goes for. It seems like Jorden blundered the c7 pawn, but not really. He does have a way of winning the material back. Rook captures on e8, rook captures, and bishop captures on c7, but now bishop to e7, going after the b4 pawn, and his idea is if Magnus defends it, let's say rook b1, then he's going to play queen a2, attack the rook and the a4 pawn, and he's going to win material back this way. So instead, pawn to b5 by Magnus, we have captures, and queen captures on b5. We have queen to f4 now, and bishop to f6. So okay, it's equal material, and the only one with the passed pawn is Jorden with that passed. It's not a passed pawn yet, but the c2 pawn is weak, so maybe he could somehow take advantage of that. We have pawn to h5 by Magnus, and now king back to g8. We have queen to d6, and now pawn to f4, giving up the f4 pawn, but you will capture the h5 pawn. So Magnus goes queen d7, attacks the rook on e8, and now queen captures on h5, grabbing the pawn while defending the rook, and now bishop captures on f4, so restoring material, and now queen to f7. Jorden offers a queen trade, and Magnus trades. We have captures, and now just rook to b1. So, well, c2 is weak, b7 could be even weaker, because this is a backwards pawn, but it's not easy to attack it. The only way to attack it, as it's on a light square, you cannot use the dark square bishop, is for the knight to somehow reach that pawn, maybe via the a3 or b4 squares, or for the knight to move, and then for the rook to go after the pawn. That's why Magnus utilizes the rook on the b file puts pressure on b7, and now the rook has to defend it. Rook to e7, and now king f1. Magnus starts bringing the king into the game. We have pawn to g5, bishop to h2, and now rook to d7. Pawn to g4. Magnus stops any further expansion on the king side by Jorden, and Jorden plays king to g6. He says, I will have to play pawn to h5. So rook to b5, and now pawn to h5 nonetheless. G captures on h5, king captures king to g2, and now king back to g6. So you can advance the g pawn if needed. Knight to d2. Now going for that e4 or c4 squares. We have knight to a7 attacking the rook, and rook back to b2. Defending the c2 pawn if needed up front. Knight back to c6, and now knight to c4 by Magnus. We have pawn to g4 now, and rook to b5, grabbing hold of the 5th rank, so not allowing Jorden to advance any further. Rook to e7, and now bishop to d6, putting pressure on the rook. Rook to h7, and now knight back to d2, preparing to shift the knight over to e4. Knight to a7 again, attacking the rook, and Magnus again goes back. We have king to f5, and now knight to e4. And here it's a very a tricky situation where Jorden has to figure out how to continue, because a lot of his pieces are tied down. He could consider something just like knight to c6, repeat the position, or he could go bishop back to d8 if he doesn't want to trade bishop for knight, but he actually goes bishop to e5. He wants to trade bishop for bishop. And okay, Magnus trades, we have captures, and now king to g3. And here, Jorden played king to g7, rook to g7, and the position is now very much winning for Magnus, but you have to figure out how to do it. It's very simple once you see it, but it's not easy to see it. So feel free to pause the video and win the game for Magnus while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on always being a true master of the endgame. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is rook to b6. That's the way to do it. And this is what Magnus played. And now, once you look at the position, there really isn't all that much Jorden can do. How do you play this? If you move the king, then you allow the white king to go to f4. If you go to f5, not much better. Just knight to d6 check will lose you the b7 pawn. What else can you try? You can move the knight. Let's say knight to c8. You go after the rook. Then comes rook b5 check, and after king to e6, you will play knight to g5 check and win the g4 pawn this way. Doesn't matter if you attack, king captures on g4, defends the knight. So there's just no good move. It's sort of a zugzwang. Rook to b6 was played, like I said, by Magnus, and now rook to c7. Jorden tries something. It seems like he can capture the c2 pawn, but not really. Magnus just captures on g4, and Jorden, of course, moves the rook back. As you see what happens if he captures on c2, it's mate in 2. F4 check, and after the king moves, rook to d6 checkmate. That's the idea. So after king captures on g4, Jorden had to go back, rook to f7, but this is now already resigned territory. Pawn to f3, rook to f4 check, and king to g3. We have rook back to f7 by Jorden, and now pawn to f4 with check. Seems like he's giving up a pawn, but Magnus will take the b7 pawn instead. So Jorden just decided not to do it. He played king captures on d5, said he wanted to preserve his b7 pawn, but by doing so, he ran into a mate in 1. So he was in this position before Magnus even played it on move 56 that Jorden van Foreest resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. Rook to d6 will be checkmate, of course, and that's why he resigned. So very, very interesting game, and you can see how different it is from the previous 7 games that Magnus played, where he really, really struggled. So what's the difference here? Jorden is an elite player. He's at 20. Okay, now he's 2700. He was probably even 27. I don't know, maybe 2730 at some point. So how does Magnus play so easily and so effortlessly against a player of Jorden's skill, and then struggles with 2500 players? Well, because Jorden, for one, is actively trying to beat Magnus. That's a pretty big deal, while the other players are very much satisfied with the draw, and they might force Magnus to push for something. But Jorden here played very actively, and he also wanted to get his chance. And it's always easier to beat someone if they are also trying to beat you. So some of you were asking in the comments that why is Magnus struggling so much? It's not that he's struggling; he's still undefeated in all of the games that he played. He just drew 3 of them, which still lost him some rating. But now I think maybe with the win against Jorden, maybe he's now actually in a plus with rating. Yeah, he's actually with a win against Jorden, he's actually on plus 0.6. So yeah. It's very hard to actually gain rating if you're Magnus. And if you guys are interested in how Norway did against the Netherlands, I think the game is still being played. Let me just check this out. Yeah, Magnus won, 2 boards drew, and Tari versus Max Farmer still being played. It seems to be an equal position. We'll see what happens there. That's the game. Hope you enjoyed it, and hope you were able to spot this rook to b6 move. Not an easy one to find, but that's why I always say you have to study the endgame. At least solve 50 puzzles before breakfast, and you will be okay. I would like to thank Maximite Chess Club, Jeff Markson, Derek King, Ahmed Halabi, and David Gasparian for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions and continuing the coverage of the European Team Championship until it finishes. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.